"I'd give you my body for food for my daughter," said the Apache woman. But the cowboy fed them both. The winter had come early that year, and with it a bitter cold that seemed to seep into the bones. The Apache woman pulled her thin shawl tight around her shoulders, trying to keep out the wind that whipped across the dry plains. Her small daughter, no more than 6 or 7, clung to her hand, her tiny fingers stiff with cold. The woman's heart ached as she looked down at her child who was pale and shivering. Food had been scarce for weeks, and now it seemed impossible to find anything to fill their empty stomachs. Every day felt like a battle against hunger, and every night brought the fear that they might not survive until morning. They had been walking for hours, the snow crunching beneath their feet, hoping to find even a scrap of food. The woman knew that most people in nearby settlement would not help them. Strangers often looked at her and her daughter with suspicion, and sometimes even with anger. She understood that survival was hard for everyone, but that did not make the gnawing emptiness in her stomach any easier to bear. She had already tried asking for help at a few cabins, but the doors were shut in her face. Each rejection cut her pride a little more, leaving her feeling smaller and weaker than ever. Her mind wandered to her husband, who had died the previous year during a harsh summer when sickness swept through their camp. Since then it had been just the two of them, mother and daughter, facing the harsh wilderness alone. The woman remembered his smile and the way he used to carry her daughter on his shoulders. Now, those memories were bittersweet reminders of what they had lost. She pushed them aside, focusing on the present. The little girl's stomach growled, and the sound made her chest tighten. She could not let her daughter suffer. Breath. She had to find food, no matter what it took. Path. As they walked along a narrow path through the snow-covered hills, she saw movement ahead. A lone figure approached, riding slowly on a horse. He was a cowboy, a man from the nearby ranch. His boots were dusty, his hat pulled low, and his coat flapped slightly in the wind. Brr. The woman froze, unsure whether to hide or to approach him. Her mind raced. But they could also be cruel. Some had been known to turn away anyone who asked for help, especially women alone with children. But hunger left her with no choice. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, gripping her daughter's hand tightly. "Please," she whispered, almost to herself. "Please." Her voice trembled, and she felt the shame of having to ask for help. But it was not just shame. It was desperation, a feeling that clung to her like the cold wind biting her face. Her daughter looked up at her, eyes wide with fear and hope, and the woman's heart broke all over again. She had to find a way to protect her child, even if it meant facing humiliation. The cowboy stopped his horse a few feet away and looked at them quietly. His eyes were calm but sharp, as if he could see the struggle in their hearts.
The woman took another step closer, her mind spinning with the choices she felt she had.
Brett. She had heard stories of other desperate women who had offered things they could not afford to give, only to be met with cruelty. But hunger made her reckless. She leaned forward slightly, her voice barely audible over the wind.
I will give you my body for food for my daughter,"
she said, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. She could feel her face burn with shame, but she could not take them back. They were words of desperation, words she had never imagined she would say. Her stomach knotted, and her hands shook. She looked at her daughter, who did not fully understand the meaning of what had been said, only that her mother was frightened. The cowboy remained silent. He did not smile, he did not scold, he did not turn away. Instead, he watched her with a steady gaze, one that seemed to carry understanding without judgment. The woman's breath came in quick, shallow bursts, her body tense and trembling. But she felt exposed, weak, and utterly helpless. But at that moment she knew she had tried everything she could. She had offered the only thing she felt she could offer, and now all she could do was wait. The little girl tugged at her mother's hand. "Mama, are we going to be okay?" she asked softly, her voice small and fragile. The woman swallowed hard, trying to hold back tears. She knelt down and pulled her daughter close, pressing her cheek to the child's hair. I don't know, my love," she whispered. "But we have to keep moving. We have to keep trying." Day. She wanted to reassure her daughter, to tell her that everything would be all right. But the truth was uncertain. The woman did not know what the cowboy would do. She did not know if they would find help today or if they would continue walking, hungry and cold, until darkness fell. The wind grew stronger, carrying with it the scent of snow and frost. The cowboy dismounted slowly, approaching them carefully. The woman's heart raced.
She braced herself, expecting the worst, ready to defend herself in whatever way she could. But the man only reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small bundle.
It was food, bread, some dried meat, and a few small vegetables. He handed it to the woman without a word, simply nodding. The woman stared at the food in disbelief. Her hands shook as she accepted it, tears streaming down her face. She could not understand why he would give them help without asking for anything in return. She looked at her daughter, whose eyes were wide with wonder, and felt a rush of gratitude she could hardly put into words. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they would survive this winter after all. They sat together in the snow, sharing the food. The woman made sure her daughter ate first, pressing the bread and meat into her tiny hands. The little girl's face lit up as she took each bite, and the woman allowed herself to relax just a little. She could feel the warmth returning to her body, the strength returning to her limbs. For now, the immediate danger had passed, and they had been given a chance to continue. As they ate, the woman looked at the cowboy again. He was quiet, watching them without any sign of impatience or judgment. There was a kindness in his eyes that she had not expected to find in the harsh world they lived in. She realized that not everyone was cruel, and that sometimes help came in the most unexpected forms. This thought gave her a small but important sense of comfort. The wind continued to howl around them, but the woman no longer felt entirely alone. And had been met with compassion instead of cruelty. She knew that the road ahead would still be hard, that survival would continue to require courage and resourcefulness. But for the first time in a long while, she felt that they could endure whatever came next. Her daughter was fed, her body warm for the moment, and her heart, though still heavy, carried a new glimmer of hope. The woman understood that this moment would be remembered forever, not because of the danger they had faced, but because of the unexpected kindness that had lifted them from despair. It reminded her that even in the harshest winters, even in a world that seemed full of hardship and suffering, humanity could still shine through in small, life-saving ways. And as they prepared to continue their journey, she held her daughter's hand tightly, silently promising that she would do everything in her power to protect her, to keep her safe, and to never lose hope again. The woman could hardly believe her eyes as the cowboy handed them the small bundle of food. Her fingers trembled as she accepted it, and she pressed it close to her chest, as though holding it too tightly might make it disappear. Her daughter looked up at her with wide eyes, sensing the strange mix of relief and disbelief radiating from her mother. For a long moment, the woman did not speak. She simply stared at the food, at the man, and at the realization that help had come when she had almost given up hope.
Yet, as gratitude filled her, a new fear began to creep in.
How could a stranger show such kindness without asking for something in return? Was there a hidden danger in this generosity? Her mind, sharpened by months of hardship and mistrust, raced with caution. She had learned that the world was not often kind, especially to those on the margins. Her pride urged her to leave, to take what was given and disappear into the wilderness before someone discovered her weakness. But hunger was stronger than pride, and her daughter's frail body reminded her that survival was the only thing that mattered. She swallowed hard and spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for this. My daughter has not eaten in days." The words sounded fragile in the icy air, almost like a confession. Breath. She looked up at him, trying to read his expression. There was no malice, no impatience, no judgment. The cowboy's eyes were calm, steady, and almost thoughtful. It was as if he understood the weight of her desperation without her needing to explain it. Her daughter, sensing the tension and the importance of this moment, stayed close to her mother's side. She clutched the woman's hand tightly, her small fingers cold and trembling. The woman realized then that this child was her entire world. She could not afford to make mistakes. Every decision, every step, every word could mean the difference between life and death. And yet here was someone offering help freely, and the woman's mind struggled to process it. In a voice trembling with both shame and necessity, she found herself speaking the words that had haunted her thoughts for days.
I will give you my body for food for my daughter, she said, her cheeks burning with embarrassment.
The wind seemed to grow colder as she spoke, as if the world itself had paused to hear her confession. She could not believe the words had left her lips. They felt wrong, and yet, at that moment, she felt they were the only thing that could save her daughter. The cowboy did not flinch. He did not react with anger or surprise. He simply stood, his expression unreadable, as if he were measuring the depth of her suffering. The woman's chest tightened. She had offered herself in a moment of absolute desperation, expecting rejection, perhaps even cruelty. But the man remained quiet. He looked at her and then at her daughter, and finally he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You will give no one anything you do not wish to give," he said. His words were gentle, but they carried a weight of authority and understanding. Needs food. That is all she needs right now. Breaths. Nothing else. You will not give anything that is not freely chosen.
Breath. Do you understand?
The woman felt a rush of relief and disbelief all at once. Her knees weakened, and she had to sit down in the snow.
Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, not just from hunger, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen, understood, and treated with respect. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her daughter leaned against her, her small body shivering, yet somehow comforted by the warmth of her mother in the presence of the stranger. The cowboy reached into his bag again and pulled out more food, bread, jerky, and some dried fruits. He handed it to the woman and gestured for her to let her daughter eat first. Hesitant, the woman broke a piece of bread and pressed it into the child's tiny hands. The girl's eyes lit up, and for the first time in days, a smile broke across her face. She took small, careful bites, and the woman watched, feeling a mixture of gratitude, relief, and astonishment. The warmth of life, once so fragile, was slowly returning to her daughter's cheeks. As they ate, the woman's mind began to wander back over the events that had brought them to this point. The journey had been long and grueling. Days of searching for food, nights spent huddled together for warmth, and the constant fear of being turned away by strangers had worn her down. Every step had been a test of endurance, every glance a silent question of whether anyone would help. And now, sitting in the snow, she realized that help had come from the most unexpected place. Her gratitude was deep, but so was her curiosity. Why are you helping us? She asked quietly, unable to hold back her question. We are strangers.
I have nothing to offer you.
The cowboy shrugged slightly, his eyes still calm.
Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. No one should have to watch their child go hungry when help is within reach.
You do not owe me anything. You owe no one anything for survival.
Breath. The woman's heart felt lighter, but a part of her still struggled to accept such kindness. She had been taught to be cautious, to expect the worst from people outside her family and tribe. The world had shown her cruelty enough times that she had built walls around herself, walls meant to protect her from disappointment and pain. And yet here was someone breaking through those walls not with force, but with compassion. Her daughter finished eating and looked up at the cowboy, her eyes curious. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, in her small, innocent voice. The cowboy smiled faintly and nodded. The woman felt a rush of warmth at the simple exchange. She realized that this man had not only fed her daughter, but had restored a small part of her own faith in humanity. For the first time in days, the woman allowed herself to breathe fully, to relax slightly, knowing that they were safe for the moment. She looked around at the snow-covered plains, the harsh wind, and the endless stretch of wilderness, and she realized that even in this unforgiving world there could be moments of unexpected kindness. The cowboy had given them more than food. As the afternoon sun began to dip behind the distant hills, the woman and her daughter sat quietly, eating the rest of the provisions. The cowboy watched them from a short distance, his horse grazing nearby. There was no rush, no demand for repayment, no hint of judgment. Just quiet, steady presence. The woman could hardly comprehend it. She had expected a test, a price, some hidden cost. But there was none. Only kindness. She thought of her husband, who had always taught her to face the world with courage and dignity. She imagined his voice reminding her that there was still goodness to be found, even in the harshest times. And she realized that he had been right. Sometimes goodness appeared in the most unexpected forms, like a stranger who stopped in the snow to offer food and protection without asking for anything in return. The woman's thoughts shifted to the future. She knew this winter would still be hard. There would be more days of searching for food, more nights spent shivering under blankets too thin to keep out the cold. But now she had learned something invaluable, that she could accept help when it was offered, that she did not have to face every hardship alone, and that even strangers could carry kindness within them. She looked at her daughter and felt a renewed sense of determination. This child had survived this far because of her, and now because of the cowboy. She silently promised herself that she would protect her daughter, teach her to survive, and show her the small, bright moments of humanity even in a world filled with hardship. For the first time in many long weeks, the woman felt a sense of cautious hope. The cowboy spoke then, his voice low but steady. "You will need more than food to get through the winter. Do you know how to find water? Do you know where to seek shelter when the snow grows too deep?" His words were not commanding. They were instructive, guiding without imposing.
The woman shook her head slowly.
"But I know some places, but not enough. We've mostly been hiding, trying not to be seen." "Then I can help with that," he said. "I know a place nearby where the snow does not pile as high. You can stay there tonight, safe and warm. But you must promise to stay together and be careful. The world is harsh, but it is kinder when we watch out for each other." The woman nodded, gratitude swelling within her chest. But she realized that this moment, this act of generosity and guidance, was more than survival. It was a lesson in trust, in humanity, and in the possibility of a future that could be brighter than the past. Her daughter looked at her with a quiet understanding. sensing the change even if she could not name it. As they followed the cowboy across the snow, heading toward the shelter he had promised, the woman felt a mixture of relief, awe, and renewed determination. She knew that life would continue to challenge her, that hunger and cold would not vanish overnight. But now, she carried hope alongside her fear, and in that hope, she found strength. A strength she had not known she still possessed. For the first time in a long time, the woman believed that they might not only survive but also find moments of peace and kindness in a world that had so often shown them cruelty. And as she glanced at her daughter holding her hand tightly, she knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together, fortified by the unexpected generosity of a stranger who had fed them not just with food, but with hope. The woman and her daughter followed the cowboy through the snow-covered hills, their footsteps slow and careful. The wind had not eased, but the presence of the cowboy made the cold feel slightly less harsh. His horse plodded steadily beside them, and he occasionally looked back to make sure they were keeping up. The woman's heart was still pounding from the events of the day. She could hardly believe that someone had helped them so freely, without asking for anything in return. Each step toward the shelter felt like a step into a world she had almost forgotten, a world where kindness could exist even amidst hardship. As they walked, the woman thought about how desperate she had been just hours ago. She remembered the gnawing hunger that had driven her to offer the cowboy something she had never imagined she would have to offer. Burned with shame at the memory, but at the same time she felt relief that the moment had passed and that the cowboy had not judged her. He had only shown understanding and compassion, a rare gift in a world so often harsh and unforgiving. The shelter he led them to was small but solid, tucked into a hollow in the hills where the snow did not pile as high. The wind howled outside, but inside the little space, it was quiet and protected. The woman felt a sense of safety she had not felt in weeks. She helped her daughter inside and began arranging a small corner with some blankets she had carried, doing her best to make it warm and comfortable. The child watched her silently, her small body exhausted but still alert, sensing the unusual safety around them. The cowboy brought over a few more supplies from his saddlebag, additional food, a small jug of water, and even a simple blanket. "You'll need these for the night," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Rest is important. Tomorrow we can think about how to make things easier for you, how to keep you and your daughter safe." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. She had not cried in front of anyone for a long time, not since her husband had passed. She had carried her grief, her fear, and her shame alone. And now, in front of this man who had appeared almost like a guardian from nowhere, she felt the weight of all that she had held in silence. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know how to repay you."
You don't need to, he said simply. You're doing what every mother does. You're protecting your child.
That's all the repayment anyone could ask for.
The woman nodded, taking in his words. There was something in his tone that made her feel as if the world could still be fair, if only in small ways.
She glanced at her daughter, who had already curled up with a piece of bread, and felt a flicker of hope she had not felt in weeks. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could survive this winter. As the hours passed, the woman began to talk quietly with the cowboy. She told him about the days of hunger, the nights spent in freezing wind, and the small victories of finding water or a scrap of edible plant. She spoke of the fear that had driven her to the edge, of the shame that had weighed on her every time she considered what she might have to do to save her daughter. And as she spoke, she realized that the cowboy listened without interruption, without judgment, with only quiet understanding. He shared small bits of wisdom in return, simple advice about where to find water that was safe to drink, how to gather small roots and edible plants even in winter, and how to recognize tracks that might lead them to game. He did not lecture or command, he guided, offering knowledge that could help them survive. The woman found herself soaking in every word, grateful not only for the guidance but for the calm assurance that came with it. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of possibility. Survival no longer felt like a desperate scramble from day to day. With this man's help, there were steps she could take, choices she could make, to ensure both her daughter and herself could endure the winter. The burden of fear did not disappear, but it became lighter, as if someone had offered a hand to carry part of the weight. Her daughter listened too, fascinated by the cowboy's quiet confidence and the strange kindness he showed. She asked questions, simple and innocent, about the snow, the plants, and the horse. The cowboy answered patiently, never rushing, always speaking in a way the child could understand. The woman watched them together and felt an overwhelming mix of gratitude and awe. Breath. She realized that this man had not just fed them. He was teaching them to survive, to hope, to trust. Night fell and the wind outside intensified, rattling the small shelter and driving the snow against the walls. The woman huddled close to her daughter, wrapping the blankets around them both. The warmth of the food in their stomachs and the small protection of the shelter offered comfort, but the fear of the harsh world outside never completely left her. She held her daughter's hand, feeling the tiny pulses of life, and whispered promises to protect her no matter what. The cowboy prepared to leave, but before he mounted his horse, he turned to the woman. "You've done well today. Keep your daughter close, stay warm, and do not be afraid to ask for help when it is truly needed. There are people in this world who will turn away, yes, but there are also those who will not. Remember that." The woman nodded, grateful but still hesitant. She wanted to believe him, but years of hardship had made trust a fragile thing. Yet, in that moment, she felt a small spark of faith, fragile but growing, that perhaps he was right. That perhaps, even in a world so often cruel, kindness could exist, and hope could survive. As he rode away, the woman and her daughter stayed inside, eating the remaining food and keeping each other warm. The little girl slept first, exhausted from hunger and fear, and the woman watched her closely, her heart full of love and determination. She thought of all the things she had endured, all the days she had walked without hope, and she realized that survival was more than finding food. It was finding the strength to keep going, to keep believing that tomorrow could be better. The woman looked out at the dark, snow-covered hills, understanding that their journey was far from over. There would still be challenges, cold nights, and days when food was scarce. But she felt a new strength, born from the unexpected kindness she had received. It reminded her that the world was not entirely cruel, that there were people who could act with compassion, and that even strangers could carry the power to change lives in small but profound ways. She held her daughter close, whispering softly about tomorrow, about the possibilities that awaited them. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that with courage, care, and the guidance she had received, they could face it together. The fear that had driven her to desperation was still there, but it no longer ruled her heart. In its place was a cautious hope, a belief that survival was possible, and that even in the hardest times, human kindness could appear when it was needed most. Through the long night, the woman kept watch over her daughter, occasionally glancing at the small pile of food that would sustain them until morning.
Each moment of rest, each breath of warmth was a gift she would never forget.
She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be more challenges than she could foresee, but she also knew that they had experienced something rare, an act of pure kindness, given freely, without expectation. It was a reminder that even in the midst of hardship there were moments of light, moments that could change the course of life. By the time the first light of dawn touched the snow, the woman felt a renewed sense of purpose. First, she would take care of her daughter, find food, and survive this winter. And she would remember the cowboy's words, carrying them like a beacon. That even in a harsh world, compassion existed, and hope could be found in the most unexpected places.
For the woman and her daughter, the day began not with fear, but with a quiet determination fueled by the lessons of the night before. They had been given more than food. They had been given guidance, protection, and the courage to keep moving forward.
And as they prepared to face the day, the woman felt a deep gratitude, a quiet strength, and a growing trust. That perhaps, just perhaps, the world was not as unforgiving as it had seemed. The next morning, the woman awoke to a pale light spilling across the snow outside their shelter. Her daughter stirred beside her, rubbing her eyes and yawning softly. For a moment, the woman just watched her child, feeling the warmth of her tiny body pressed against hers. The night had been long and cold, but they had survived. The food the cowboy had provided the previous day had kept them from going hungry, and for the first time in weeks, the woman felt a flicker of confidence that they could continue living even in this harsh winter. She quickly prepared a small meal from the remaining food.
Her daughter ate eagerly, smiling between bites, and the woman felt a surge of gratitude. Even in the coldest, hardest times, small moments of joy could exist.
She packed a few scraps of bread and dried meat into a cloth bundle just in case the day's journey demanded more strength. The wind howled outside, but inside their tiny shelter there was a fragile sense of warmth and safety. By mid-morning, the cowboy returned. He had ridden out early, scouting the land, and now he came back to check on them. The woman greeted him with a mixture of relief and curiosity. She had learned to trust him cautiously, but the knowledge that he could disappear as quickly as he had appeared still made her wary. "You're up early," he said, his voice calm. "Good," breath. "We have work to do today."
Work?
The woman asked, a little uncertainly. "Yes. Survival is more than finding food for one day. You need skills, knowledge, and preparation. I will teach you what I can, and you will use it to care for your daughter." The woman nodded slowly, realizing that this man's help extended far beyond mere kindness. He wanted to empower them, to give them the tools to face the harshness of winter themselves. She felt a strange mixture of gratitude and humility. She had been used to relying solely on her own strength and cunning, but now someone had stepped in to guide her, to teach her ways she had never known.
They set out together, the cowboy leading the way through the snow-covered hills.
He showed them small details that the woman had overlooked in her desperation. Where the snow was thin enough to dig for roots, how to spot tracks of small animals that could lead to food, and where to find water that would not freeze even in deep cold. The woman watched carefully, absorbing every word. She practiced what he taught her, digging carefully for roots and examining tracks in the snow. Each discovery was a small victory, a reminder that knowledge could be just as important as courage in surviving the wilderness. Her daughter walked beside her, curious and eager to help. She learned quickly, mimicking her mother's movements and repeating the cowboy's instructions. The woman felt a swelling pride. Her child was strong, intelligent, and quick to learn. She realized that this guidance from the cowboy was not only keeping them alive, it was shaping her daughter into someone who could navigate the world safely. But throughout the day, the cowboy remained patient and steady. He offered advice without judgment and correction without anger. The woman noticed how different he was from most people they had encountered in their lives. Many strangers might have scolded or dismissed them, but he seemed to see their potential, to believe in their ability to endure and learn. The woman found herself slowly lowering the walls she had built around her heart, feeling a cautious trust grow in their presence. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they returned to their small shelter. The woman's hands were raw from digging in the snow and handling frozen roots, but she felt a quiet satisfaction. They had gathered enough food and water for the night, and more importantly, they had learned the skills to do it again tomorrow. The sense of accomplishment was a balm to the exhaustion that had weighed on her for so long. The cowboy shared more food with them and sat near the fire he had built. The woman noticed how carefully he arranged the logs,
how methodically he added kindling, and how he adjusted the flames to maximize warmth. Even simple tasks, she realized, could be done with skill and patience. She and her daughter watched, absorbing each action as another lesson in survival. "Tomorrow," the cowboy said, "we will try hunting. You will learn how to track and approach game without scaring it away. It is not easy, but it is a skill you must learn."
Ration. The woman nodded.
She felt a mixture of apprehension and determination.
Hunting had always seemed daunting, especially in winter when animals were scarce and cautious. But she trusted the cowboy's guidance and knew that learning this skill was essential for their continued survival. The evening passed quietly. The woman helped her daughter eat and rest, tucking her into blankets and sharing the warmth of her own body. She reflected on the events of the day. Just a few days ago, they had been on the brink of starvation, facing a cruel and different world. Now, with the cowboys' guidance and their own growing skills, they had hope. They were learning not only to survive, but also to live with a sense of agency, to understand the land and its resources in ways they had never known before. At one point, the woman spoke softly to the cowboy. "I never imagined anyone would help us like this. I thought we were alone in the world. Breath. I don't know how to thank you."
You don't need to, he replied, his tone gentle.
You're doing the hard work yourself. I'm only showing you the way.
You carry the courage and strength. It is yours, not mine. Remember that. Breath. She realized the truth in his words. While he had provided the guidance and resources, the work and determination had come from her. She had faced the hunger, the cold, and the fear. She had kept her daughter alive through sheer will. Now she was learning skills that would ensure they could continue to survive, and she could take pride in that knowledge. Night fell, and the temperature dropped sharply. The woman huddled close to her daughter, sharing warmth and whispering encouragement. She thought of the days ahead, knowing that challenges would continue to come, but feeling stronger because they had learned to face them together. The cowboys' lessons had given them more than food. They had given them hope, knowledge, and the sense that survival was possible even in the harshest conditions. In the quiet of the night, the woman thought about trust. She had learned to rely only on herself for so long, to expect cruelty and hardship from everyone she met. But now she understood that trust could be earned, and that sometimes accepting help was not a weakness, but a strength. The cowboy had shown her that. His patience, guidance, and kindness were proof that the world could contain generosity, even when it seemed most unlikely. By dawn, the woman felt ready for the next challenge. She had learned to gather, to observe, and to plan. She had seen her daughter grow stronger and more confident. She knew that hunting would be difficult, but she also knew that they could face it together, guided by the cowboy and their own determination. As they prepared to leave the shelter, the woman felt a quiet determination in her heart. They had survived so far, and they would continue to do so. Each day brought lessons, each moment brought growth, and each act of kindness reinforced the fragile trust they were learning to place in others. The journey was far from over, but now, for the first time, she felt they were truly equipped to face it.
Walking beside her daughter, the woman reflected on how far they had come. Just a few days ago, despair had nearly consumed them.
Hunger and cold had made the world seem cruel and unforgiving. Now, they were learning skills that could save their lives, discovering hope in unexpected kindness, and beginning to understand that survival required not only courage, but also trust, learning, and care. The woman knew that the winter was still long and dangerous, that challenges awaited them at every turn. But she felt stronger, more prepared, and more determined than ever. With the cowboy's guidance and her own growing knowledge, she would face the days ahead with hope and courage, keeping her daughter safe and showing her that even in the hardest times, there could be moments of light and hope. And as the woman looked at her child walking beside her through the snow-covered hills, she silently promised herself that she would never give up, never lose faith, and never stop striving for survival. Breath. They had been given a second chance, and she would honor it with every step, every decision, and every moment of care she could offer. The morning was still cold, but the woman felt a quiet strength within her that she had not known before. After days of despair, hunger, and fear, she now walked with a purpose. Her daughter held her hand tightly, her small face bright with curiosity and confidence. Today, they would put all the lessons they had learned to use. They would try hunting, guided by the cowboy, and the woman felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The cowboy led them to a small clearing where the snow was less deep and animal tracks crisscrossed the ground. He explained how to follow the tracks carefully, how to move quietly without startling the creatures they were tracking. The woman listened intently, absorbing every word. She had learned so much in the past days: how to gather, how to find water, how to protect her daughter. But this was the first time she would try something so daring. Her daughter, eager and curious, mimicked her mother's movements. She crouched low, trying to step softly, and watched the cowboy for guidance. The woman smiled briefly at her child, proud of her courage. But the little girl's spirit was unbroken, and her determination gave the woman a renewed sense of hope. Together they followed the cowboy's instructions, moving quietly through the snow, watching the tracks and listening for any signs of movement. Fast. Hours passed in careful, patient effort. The woman's muscles ached, her fingers were stiff from the cold, and hunger tugged at her stomach. But she kept going. Breaths. She thought about how far they had come. Just a few days ago, they had been desperate, on the edge of starvation. Now they were learning skills that could save their lives. She felt pride in herself, in her daughter, and in the small bond they had formed with the cowboy. Finally, they spotted movement ahead, a small rabbit, cautious and alert, hopping among the sparse bushes. The woman froze, remembering the cowboy's instructions about approaching quietly and carefully. She signaled to her daughter to stay still, and together they moved closer, their breath steadying as they prepared. The cowboy whispered encouragement, guiding her hand as she took aim. When the moment came, the woman acted with precision. The rabbit was caught, and a surge of relief and accomplishment washed over her. She had done it. She had hunted successfully, not just for survival, but as a demonstration of the skills she had learned. Her daughter clapped softly, eyes shining with admiration and excitement. The woman felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were not tears of despair. They were tears of pride, hope, and gratitude. The cowboy nodded, smiling faintly. "Well done," he said. "Bye. You've learned quickly. Remember, hunting is not just about catching food. It's about patience, observation, and respect for the land."
You have shown all of those qualities today.
A paw. The woman carefully prepared the rabbit, showing her daughter how to handle it with care and respect. Together they cooked a simple meal over a small fire, the warmth of the flames pushing back against the cold and fear that had once dominated their lives. As they ate, the woman felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They were not only surviving, they were thriving, learning to face the challenges of the world with courage, skill, and hope. After the meal, the cowboy spoke to them about the importance of safety and preparation. He showed them how to reinforce their shelter against the wind, how to store food to prevent it from spoiling, and how to conserve energy for long days in the snow. The woman listened intently, realizing that every small lesson was a building block for their continued survival. Each word, each action, gave her more confidence that they could endure whatever the winter might bring. Past. The woman and her daughter continued to learn and grow. They became adept at finding food, staying warm, and navigating the harsh landscape. The woman's fear, once overwhelming, now existed alongside a cautious hope. She understood that the world could be cruel, but she also knew that kindness, guidance, and determination could create a life worth living, even in the hardest conditions. Her daughter thrived under the woman's care and the cowboy's guidance. She learned quickly, gaining confidence in her abilities and curiosity about the world around her. The woman watched her child with a mixture of pride and relief. This young girl, once fragile and starving, was now learning to navigate the world with courage and intelligence. The woman felt a profound gratitude, not only for their survival, but for the life lessons her daughter was receiving. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and painted the sky with shades of gold and pink, the woman and her daughter sat together in their shelter. The wind still howled outside, but inside there was warmth, safety, and the quiet comfort of having made it through another day. The woman held her daughter close, reflecting on everything they had endured and everything they had learned. Breath. She remembered the desperation she had felt, the shame and fear that had driven her to make an impossible offer, and she realized how far they had come since that day. The cowboy had come to visit them once more before heading back to his ranch. He brought additional supplies and shared advice for the days ahead. "You've done well," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You've learned skills that will help you survive and thrive. Remember, the land can be harsh, but it can also provide if you know how to listen, watch, and act carefully." The woman nodded, a smile breaking across her face. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. You saved our lives, and you taught us how to live."
"You did the hard work," he replied. "I only guided you."
"Your courage and determination are what made this possible." As he rode away, the woman watched the dust swirl behind him, feeling a mixture of sadness and gratitude. He had become more than a helper. He had become a teacher, a guardian, and a reminder that compassion and guidance could change lives. She turned to her daughter, who now understood more about the world than she had a few days ago. Together, they would continue to survive, guided by the lessons they had learned and the trust they had built. The woman realized that this winter had taught her something important. Survival was not just about food, shelter, and warmth. It was about courage, resilience, and hope. It was about the strength to face impossible odds and the wisdom to accept help when it was offered. She had faced despair and shame, but she had also discovered the power of human kindness and the importance of trust. In the weeks that followed, their days became more routine, but no less meaningful. Breath. Each morning brought new challenges, but also new victories. The woman and her daughter grew stronger, more skilled, and more confident. They no longer lived in constant fear of starvation. Instead, they embraced each day as an opportunity to learn, to survive, and to thrive. The little girl's laughter began to return, brightening the cold days with warmth and joy. The woman watched her with a mixture of awe and pride. She realized that they had been given a gift far greater than food. They had been given hope, safety, and the chance to live fully, even in the harshest conditions. One evening, as they sat together in the shelter, the woman reflected on the cowboy's kindness. She thought about the moment when she had offered herself out of desperation and how he had refused her offer while giving them what they needed most. That act of generosity had changed everything. It had not only saved their lives, but had restored their faith in humanity and taught them the value of compassion, respect, and dignity. The woman hugged her daughter tightly, whispering softly, "We are safe now."
"We can face anything together," the little girl smiled, feeling the warmth and security of her mother's love. And the woman knew that they truly had the strength to endure the winter, the hardships, and whatever else life might bring.
As the snow fell silently outside, the woman felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. Their journey had been long and painful, filled with fear and uncertainty, but it had also been filled with learning, growth, and unexpected kindness. They had survived the worst of the winter, and in doing so, they had discovered courage, hope, and the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter. And in that small, fragile shelter, amidst the cold and snow, they were no longer just surviving. They were living, learning, and thriving. The woman understood that the world could still be harsh and unpredictable, but she also knew that with courage, wisdom, and compassion, they could face it together, ready for whatever came next. The winter would continue, and challenges would come, but the woman's heart was no longer weighed down by despair. It was lifted by hope, strengthened by survival, and filled with gratitude for the kindness of a stranger who had shown them a path forward. And as she looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully beside her, she knew that they were ready for the future, whatever it might hold.